Hello, it's me again. I'm doing this a little bit late because I've been pretty sick the past week and I couldn't talk properly. So, welcome. This is my February book reads. Thank you to everybody who watched the first one, and by that I mostly mean the people I asked to watch the first one. You mean a lot to me. Today we've gone for a red background. I have the power to change this. If you think the red is too intense, please let me know. I can do all sorts of things. What I can't do is pick the one I want without going through a whole number of... there we go. Okay, hello. February. I read some books. They're not all horror books. They are all horror books in some form. Fewer than before. February is obviously a short month, but we have a visitor. Ooh. Ah. Say hi, Curtis. Oh my goodness. He's here to help me, but he also loves to scratch at the door. He is not being held prisoner. But if you hear a squeaky, scratchy noise, that is him trying to get out. He's on my knee, but you just can't quite see him. Okay, so let's start talking about books. First book I read in February, 13 Stories. That's the other side to last time. 13 Stories by Jonathan Sims. This was good. So this is a selection of interconnected short stories. I don't like being on this side. This is some interconnected short stories all set in the same block of flats in London, in Whitechapel specifically. If you have seen the TV version of The Fall of the House of Usher, it reminded me of that. What they do with that show is they take all of the short stories and interpret them as one large overarching plot, which I enjoyed. It's a Mike Flanagan TV show. He did Bly Manor and Hill House, which are both amazing TV shows. Fall of the House of Usher was a bit more experimental, still good fun, but less of a traditional ghost story. And this book, 13 Stories, has the same atmosphere. All of these people know each other and they pass each other throughout the books. There does come a point where I started to forget who was who, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Now, last month you may recall me mentioning that these videos are inspired by the Gab Smulders book reviews. I did not link them before, but I will try to do so today in case anybody wants more horror book reviews. She has done loads of these before. I got this book recommendation from one of her videos, and she said that she struggled to remember who everybody was. And I was convinced I would have the same problem because that is the exact sort of thing that happens to me. However, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. I did remember most of the people. It was only really towards the end that I got a bit lost. I wasn't going to buy it initially because I thought it was lift horror because of the cover, which I'm sure you can see. And I don't like lifts. I get scared in lifts. They freak me out. And I didn't want to worsen that fear. But very little of this book is set inside the lift. You will be pleased to know. If you don't like lifts, it's fine. Actually, it's a story about ghosts, and it's a little confusing because all the hauntings are different, even though they're all set in the same place, and all of these people, they live in the same block of flats and are theoretically being haunted by the same thing. It manifests differently for everybody, which again got a little confusing. But I also think that if you wrote the exact same thing happening to 12 or 13 different people, that wouldn't be a very interesting story. So, cup of tea. It's very good. It's very modern. That's it. I think the end, it got a little bit... This is something that happens sometimes in horror, that it's very easy to slip into things being silly. It happened a little bit even with my top book of January, the Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre. The end got a little bit silly. It happens a little bit again with this book. I do think when you're writing about anything gory, anything supernatural, you can either go for something very tragic, or you can go for something less tragic but perhaps taking the mick a little bit. It's a fine line to walk down to get an ending that is serious enough that the payoff is satisfactory for a reader, but it also doesn't shift the tone into that tragic storytelling that is not necessarily what you're aiming for. I think there is a perception of horror to people who don't read it as quite a tragic genre when it isn't. It is a silly genre at heart. And it ties in very well with comedy on a genre level. It wasn't that bad, the ending. Having said all that, having just gone through that whole spiel, I wasn't 100% satisfied, but I was halfway there. I think it's worth reading. It's not worth rereading, but it's worth reading one time. It was fun, it was interesting, and if you have a better memory than me, then you may be able to keep up with who everybody is, and that might improve it for you. I'm talking like I didn't enjoy it. I did. I loved it. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Next, Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zeng by Kylie Lee Baker. Is it Baker or Barker? I cannot read my notes. It will say so. It will say on the screen, I think it's Baker. This could very well be my book of the year. It's very early to call it. But this book was everything. It's pandemic era horror. It's not about the pandemic. I think that pandemic stories do put people off a bit. It's still recent enough that people don't think it's interesting to read about. My cat would love to leave the room right now. I know I told you guys he's not being held here prisoner, but he would argue otherwise. I wish I had in a second camera to show you this. This is the toy that came with him when we adopted him. One of them. He also has a Garfield pillow. What am I trying to do? The state of this is awful. Sorry. Yow! Catnip. This is what he would like. Oh my god, where did he go? That's the cat. So this book is... It's ghosts. Oh, right, I need to be over here. It's ghosts, but what it's actually about, it's about racism against East Asians during the COVID pandemic. And my cat is determined to interrupt this. So, it's a slasher in a way. There is an unknown killer on the loose who is targeting East Asian women in New York. I believe it's set in New York. Cora, the protagonist, is a crime scene cleaner along with two of her friends, and has been since her own sister was pushed under a metro train, the underground. Is that what they call it in New York? The metro? She was pushed under a train. That's not a spoiler, that is the opening chapter. I'm quite convinced I have something in my eye. I'm not crying, although obviously that is quite sad. I may need to let the cat out of the room. Come say hello. What are you doing today? Oh my gosh. Stand up here. Come on. Did you like Bat Eater and other names for Cora Zeng? I'm gonna let him out of the room. The cat's gone. Oh, goodness. So, the gory scenes are very gory. You have to know that going into it. I knew that before I read it. That was what I'd heard about this book, is that the gore is goring, as they say. And I love reading that. Not everybody does. Some people prefer their horror more supernatural and less slasher. I prefer my horror more slasher, less supernatural, to be honest. As much as I love a supernatural story, which we will get into some of those in the future, this is more of a story for gory fans. Gorsters, if you will. So once again, I'm going to talk about the ending of this book, and I'm not going to talk about it with any spoilers, but what I'm going to say is it treads a fine line between doing the ending perfectly and making it silly. So we were talking about this before, and I'm going to talk a little bit about book writing structure as a whole here, so bear with me. There are two driving factors for a protagonist in any novel. First is what they want, or rather what they think they want, and this will shape their goal in the first half of the novel. The second is what they need, which often they don't know what they need. At some point they will discover it. This will be at some point after the midpoint of the novel, the midpoint being a big turning point at which the rest of the novel is reframed in some fashion, big or small. Sometimes what the protagonist needs is not revealed at the midpoint, it's revealed at the end. It can be at any point in between the midpoint and the end point. And it can be subtle, it can be obvious. This book is one of the cases where what the protagonist needs and what the protagonist wants do not switch over until very close to the end. I don't think that's a problem. I think it is in keeping with the way the book is paced. I think changing it would detract from the speed and flow of the rest of the plot. And having it at the end does not detract from anything else, but it does take one small thing away from you as a reader, and that is the expected satisfaction of the protagonist's initial goal being realised. So the protagonist's initial goal is never realised in this book, and I think this is something that I personally struggle with as a reader. It's not necessarily something that's wrong with the book. I will give you another example. So, most people, at least most people my age that I know, have read the Hunger Games trilogy. The first time I read the Hunger Games, I did enjoy it, but the second book in the trilogy, this is minor spoilers if you haven't read the Hunger Games trilogy or seen the films and you want to, but I'm assuming most people know the concept. So in the Hunger Games, you have a group of teenagers, you enter an arena and they fight to the death, okay? That's the premise. In the second book, it's a all-star arena. A bunch of people who've won previously, they're all put into the arena. You expect them to fight to the death. And that doesn't happen. They do something else with it. And I distinctly recall reading this and just being a little frustrated that actually that didn't happen. And it's not that I want a bunch of people to fight to the death, although my current taste in books might explain this one a little bit. It's more that the whole first third of the book, or even 2/3, I can't really remember, is set up giving you this expectation as a reader. And then it does something else. I'm sure actually if I reread it now, particularly with hindsight, there would be more nuance to how I saw it, with the political plotline that is going on in Hunger Games as well, and the sort of rebellion against the system. And I know that is the point of the novel, and I know that is what they need, but as a reader, it just didn't tick those boxes for me the first time I read it. Again, does that mean there's something wrong with it? Absolutely not. I'm just giving an example of how I do struggle with this as a reader, and it's personal. It's not. It might not bother everybody, but it does bother me, and there is a tiny bit of that at the end of Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zeng. Only because the finale sequence is... How do I explain this without spoiling anything? It's not what you are told to expect. I think that much is obvious from what I've said already. But on top of that, you don't get to see the ramifications of the actions taken in the finale sequence. You are told what happens. You do not see it. I think that doesn't help. But again, this is me making a very, very big point out of something that didn't make the book worse at all. It's just something about storytelling in general that I wanted to mention, because it is hard, and it's a matter of reader satisfaction, balanced with the plot line and the actual purpose of the story you're telling. Because a lot of the time, what the protagonist needs, this ultimate goal that is realised at the end of the book, is tied to the purpose of why you're telling the story. Okay? It's thematic more than it is physical. And again, that is hard to reconcile as a plot point. It's hard to make it a satisfactory action that is taken. I've been going on about this for way too long. You get it. That's enough of that, because this book was awesome. I would like to stockpile copies of this book in my house. I want to put one in every room. The cover is amazing. It's really beautiful and so clever. The writing, so smooth. The gore descriptions. Ooh. You have to read it for yourself if that is something you are interested in. Ooh. Full marks. 5 out of 5. Contender for Book of the Year. I loved this book. Apart from my whole thing about narrative, which isn't even really relevant, it was just me going on a little rant about why writing's really hard. Apart from that tiny thing, I'll probably be dreaming about this book in 10 years' time. I don't even want to talk about other books today. No, I will. Okay, let's move on. Just read that book. Read that book, please. Particularly if you did like the retirement home. No, the Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre, which I read last month. I think it's for a very similar audience. Okay? Okay. Moving on. Okay, so then I read a short story, an older book called The Stepdaughter by Caroline Blackwood. This is horror technically, but it's not direct horror, it's indirect horror. Psychological, I suppose. About a middle-aged lady whose husband is running off with a younger woman, but has left her, the wife, in a fancy flat apartment with their young child, but also his child from a previous marriage. So there's this teenager in the house who has no familial connection to anyone else. And while the book is called The Stepdaughter, it's all told from the perspective of the wife who's being left, who is unnamed throughout the whole book. The book is told in a really interesting narrative style, where the narrator is writing fake letters. So she wants to write letters explaining her situation and her mental state to someone, but she doesn't have anyone she can write these letters to, so she writes them in her head. and that is the book. It's all these letters she's writing to no one. That in itself was really interesting. I thought that would be a bit of a slog because I have not enjoyed epistolary novels in the past, such as Dracula, which I didn't finish. But it wasn't. It was smooth. It was comfortable reading, and for being a slightly older novel as well, there's always a hesitation with older novels, but also older horror in particular. Things which we perceive as horrifying change a lot depending on the social context of the world we live in. So, risky, and I will say a large portion of the plot line revolves around the fact the unnamed wife, hates her stepdaughter for being ugly. And while it works in the context of this book, because it is a bit older and it has the layers behind it that make it make sense, do I think that would be a justifiable cause for psychological horror in modern storytelling? No. But it works and it's interesting, and actually it doesn't come off as disrespectful by the end. There is... The reason it is a psychological horror is because the unnamed wife is putting all of her distress about her husband leaving her onto the stepdaughter to whom she has no relation, which is naturally unfair. And she's very, very cruel. She says all these horrible things in her fake mind letters. Can we call them mind letters? Yeah. But even as she does so, it's getting more and more complex, her relationship with her stepdaughter, who over time she does come to love and respect in her own way through being horrible to her. I don't know if I can explain it better than that. The end is quite sad. It's one of those books that has no real resolution, but it's only very short. If you're interested in the history of female horror writers, Caroline Blackwood is an interesting one. This is the first time I've read any of her work. I would recommend it, but I do think you have to approach it with that knowledge that it is slightly older, and I do think you have to view it with the context of Caroline's life. Just a small awareness of that. The book, at least the version I have, comes with a preface about Caroline Blackwood, which I read before I read the book. It did help. I think I enjoyed it more with the background knowledge than I would have done without. But it's definitely not like anything else I've ever read. I wasn't sure I'd like it, and I did in the end. So for a short story recommendation, particularly, as I say, if you're interested in the history of female horror writing, do have a gander. Have a gander with this one. Having said that, I would rate it 3.5 out of 5. I'm a harsh rater. I'm sorry. I've said it before and I'll say it again. There's only 5 stars. I can't hand them all out all the time. And I don't. So, anyway, that was the Stepdaughter. Okay. The next book. This was recommended to me by a friend. Well, recommended is the wrong word. A friend of mine wanted me to read this. Is what I'll actually say. This is the first self-published book I have reviewed in a video, so I will say that to begin with, because it is different. I will do more self-published horror going forward, because I think I should. I think I have to. And as a writer myself, I know that publication is a really massive, almost impossible goal. So, it's good to support indie and self-published writers. This is The Crimson Crib by Elijah Lorigas. I'm really bad at pronouncing people's names, so sorry if that was wrong. So my friend wanted me to read this book because they've seen videos of the author talking about it. Actually could not find any when I asked to see it. But I read the book anyway, and yeah. I will say, I think the premise is very interesting. I think the book needs to be about twice as long as it is, because I think what's in there is fine and it's interesting, but it doesn't give itself space to develop into a cohesive narrative. I really appreciated the characters. Actually, I think I can't remember the name of the secondary character. She's described as being, she, her pronouns, but she's described as having a lot of masculine features, and I did read the little author bio in the book. I'm pretty sure the author, Elijah, uses they, them pronouns. So there is this slipped in representation of characters who don't fit strict gender presentation, which is something you don't see enough of in books at all, firstly. So that was really enjoyable. And I love the flashback. I should tell you what the book's about. I will try. From what I could gather, this is set in a world where women can no longer have children. I assume men also can't have children, but the book was more focused on trying to artificially recreate pregnancies to fix whatever was wrong with humanity that had made them all stop being able to have kids. Like I say, that's an interesting premise in its way. I didn't really know what was going on. I'm a short attention span reader, so this again may be on me. That is as much as I could glean from this book. That there were some characters whose names I can't remember, and that they were in a world with no babies, and one gets sucked into an experiment unwillingly to try and host a artificial pregnancy. If I understood more of the book, I would tell you more. But that's as much as I got from it. There are some interesting relationships in there, but again, it needed to be about twice as long just to give me more context for everything that was happening. The writing's fine, there were a couple of small typos, but again, this is self-publishing, so that's perfectly reasonable. It didn't stop me understanding the book. So here's the thing. Traditional publishing is incredibly hard to achieve without already having connections in the industry. And even then, I'm sure it's quite difficult. It's something I would love to do one day with my writing, and I haven't achieved it yet, so I by no means claim that I know everything or that I am better than people who self-publish. I'm not. But when you read self-published books, there is a difference, and I do think they should be judged separately to traditionally published books. And a portion of that difference is not because of the author. It is because they have a much smaller team. When you go through traditional publishing, there is a team of people around you who are all professionals, and they've all been doing it likely for a long time. At least most of them will have been doing it for a long time, because it's their job. Your book will get put through a lot between getting sent to an agent, which is the first thing you do for traditional publishing, and actually being on a bookshelf. If you self-publish a book, you do not have that support system. So you can be an amazing writer. You can have a really great idea, actually, as I think this book does. And without that massive support system, of course you're going to create something that is not of the same quality, and that is not necessarily on you. So I do want to make that clear when I'm talking about self-published books, and even to an extent indie publications, which sit somewhere in the middle. I didn't like this book. I think it needs refinement. But I don't think the author is bad. I think the author needs to push with this novel, and I'm not saying they haven't, because it takes a lot of work. But I do think if they wanted to write twice as many scenes and throw them all together, it would be beneficial. And then once they've done that, write the whole thing again from scratch one more time. And then I think it will be good. Because I can't tell you the characters' names. I cannot tell you the moral of the story. Not that there necessarily needs to be one, but there needs to be some kind of message. I can barely tell you anything about this book, and it's not that long since I read it. I didn't really understand it at the time I was reading it. But I can see the idea behind it. And I think there is the makings of a horror author in there. But they haven't quite come out with this book. So I actually did something I never do. I left this book unrated because I don't think it's fair to rate it against the standards I rate traditionally published novels, but also because I don't want to rate it low because I didn't like it, which I would if I rated it. It wouldn't be great. But I don't think the author deserves that. And that's what I'll say. That's where I'll stop with that one. Let them cook. Let them cook. Give it a few years. I will see what they put out next. Nah. That's that one. Next. Okay, my last read of the month. This one's slightly cheating because I finished it on the 2nd of March, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, because otherwise I don't only have 4 books, and I just think 5 is a better number. This was The Promised Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. I read her other book, The Possession of Alba Diaz, last month, and I loved it. And so I said I would read her other book next, and I did, and it was fine. It's still good. It's still good, but it's much less memorable to me than her other book. If you're looking for an Isabel Cañas book to read, The Possession of Alba Diaz I thought was better than The Hacienda. This is a classic haunted house, but set in Mexico in the 1820s. Once again, combining the gothic and the historical, the atmosphere incredible. The characters, I didn't connect with the characters as much in this book as her other book. And I do think there was potential for a bit more drama and tension with the church that felt like it was being set up and it didn't really go anywhere, which is fine because it does in her other book. And you don't want to write the exact same thing every time, although I will say it does feel a bit formulaic now, having read 2 of her books. There were a lot of similarities in how they're structured, with the underlying romance subplot and working against the church because there's a supernatural power which is actually helping them, but obviously the church would just think it was bad. Outsider woman in a supernatural location. You know, it's all the elements are the same. All the elements are the same as Alba Diaz, but still good fun. I feel like the ending was... No, that's not true. I was going to say I feel like the ending was better than in The Possession of Alba Diaz, but I think they're about the same. I don't know. Why don't I make a whole video just to say I don't know? Okay. Thinking head on. If I hadn't read her other book first, would I have enjoyed this one more? Yes, I would. And I enjoyed it less because of the similarities, and because I think the other one does the same thing but slightly better. There we go. This one is more haunted house, so there is that, which is different, and it's got... They both have male romantic interests who dabble in secret dark magic, but they're both quite soft, kind, gentle people. They're very similar. And the female protagonists are also very similar. Has she read any other books? Read? I'm sure she's read other books. Has she written any other books? I don't know. I will still read her other books, if and when I can. And I will let you know if she does it every single time she writes a book. This could be a coincidence. She might never do this again. If she does it every single time, That's a problem. Twice in a row. Could be worse. Could be worse. I think there was a bit of missed potential in this book. The pacing was a little bit off. But it was fine. I have it down as a 4 out of 5, but having said everything I've just said, I'm bringing it down to a 3. I didn't realise. I think I wrote the 4 of the 5. 4 of the 5. What's going on? I think I wrote 4 out of 5 in the heat of the moment after reading it. And your opinions on books do change depending on how long it's been since you read them. So that's a shift. I like it less than I thought I did initially. That might mean you enjoy it more when you read it than what I've just described. When you read it. Not if. There you go. So that's that. That's all the books I read this month. And one I finished at the start of March, which is this month. So the other books are last month. Oh, it's all very confusing. This is very confusing. Now I'm going to rate them. In my last video I did the tier chart, but actually I just thought it was a bit rubbish. So I'm not going to do it again. I'm just going to tell you. Are you ready? It's all on my sticky note. Oh, I can't read that. There we go, now it's in the light. Okay. Top book. Obviously. Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zeng by Kylie Lee Baker. Amazing. I wish I'd written this book. I mean, I don't, because it's about racism against East Asians in New York, which obviously I shouldn't write that. Stylistically, I just made my whole screen wobble in enthusiasm. Stylistically, I wish I could write like this. That's a better sentence. There you go. I want to eat this book. I want it in my bloodstream. Okay, next. 13 Stories by Jonathan Sims. He has had quite an interesting career. If you want to look him up, please do, because I can't remember the name of the other thing he's done. But he's quite interesting as a person, so just the range of things he's done, not as a person. I don't know what he's like as a person. Yeah, I did enjoy that. It wasn't about being stuck in a lift and the lift falling down, which is my personal horror story. So that was nice. It's ghostly. It's Whitechapel, which is an area I'm somewhat familiar with. That always makes a book more interesting. Yeah, oh, my notes. Don't look at those. It's for me. Third. This one's a bit of a hard one. I'm actually going to say, in hindsight, this is the other way round to what I thought it would be, but I'm going to say The Stepdaughter comes in the middle, by Caroline Blackwood, because I think I'm going to think about it more going forward. Again, this is about having that slight distance between having just read it and reviewing it. When you let a book sit in your brain, it will either disappear or it will stick somewhere. And I think the books which stick somewhere are not always the ones that you enjoy the most in the moment of reading them. But they are more powerful. And I will give The Stepdaughter that little step up. step. So, there you go. That's my middle book. Then the Hacienda, because it was fine. It was just a bit too similar to her other book for me. And then at the bottom is Crimson Crib, but again, I do think it has potential, and I definitely think the writer has potential in a few more years with a few more projects. So I'm excited to see where that goes. Bonus book! Yay! Bonus book. So this is my thing I do, starting last month with my first video, now continuing in my second video, where I give you a book recommendation of books I've read before. This month, I was about to say this week. Imagine if I did this every week. Gosh, I'd have to read a lot faster. This month is Looking Glass Sound by Catriona Ward. When I finished this book, I had to put it down and walk out the house and into the forest in the rain. That is not an exaggeration. That is what I had to do because I just couldn't... It wasn't sinking in. I needed to go for a walk. You know, things are serious when you need to go for a walk. This book has so many twists. I've read another one of her books since then, and I get the impression this is what she is known for. She does twists and turns and leapfrogs constantly throughout this book, and you'd think you would get tired, but actually it was just making me insane. I loved this book, and it did not do anything I expected. But in a good way. In a satisfying way. Oh, I think it might be divisive because I can also see, if you would read this book, how you would hate that. I loved it. If it had been done badly, I would hate it, but I think it was done really, really well. I've actually just bought her newest book. I bought a signed copy at Waterstones, and I can't remember the name of it. Okay. Very excited to read her new one. This book is... How do I describe this book? There's a teenager, he goes on holiday, meets some rich kids on holiday, becomes sort of obsessed with them, they become friends, everything goes horribly wrong. Not in a Saltburn kind of way, in a better way than that. Better way? In a more interesting way than that. It's got that class theme going on throughout, but it's also got a lot of other things. There's magic, sort of. There's narrative changes. There's character doing chapters and you really don't even know who they are until very late in the book. Oh my goodness. This book made me so crazy, and in a good way. Read this book if you want to feel insane. Thank you. That's all. We've done it again. Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed my cat Curtis, his little cameo today. I don't think he did. He's off doing something else now. I hope he's having fun. I hope you enjoyed the red light. We can do blue next month, and then I think I've done everything apart from party mode, or some variety of party mode, which we could maybe do at some point, but I also think it would hurt your eyes and mine. We'll see. Maybe for a special occasion. Thank you very much for joining me. Stay spooky.